to look more closely at how the tensions in Egypt are impacting the commodity sector. A short time ago, I spoke with Jono Barratt, Managing Director of Commodity Broking Services. Jono Barratt, welcome to Business Today.
Good morning, Whitney.
Now, we've just heard the situation, how the situation will affect, Australia's top agricultural, one of Australia's top agricultural companies. In your assessment, what does it mean for the sector in general?
Look, I think a lot of uncertainty. I think that's really the key. There's a lot of talk as to how it will affect some of the soft markets, the grains in particular. But I feel at the moment the market is uncertain as to what could occur. There's still a lot of tension. We have seen moves before in previous instances, particularly in some of the other commodities, where we've seen quite significant concerns. So I do feel that this is something we've got to make sure we keep an eye on. Excuse me, and anything really could happen. So we're on tenterhooks.
Now, Egypt is it is the world's biggest importer of wheat, and it's in crisis talks with major exporters to increase the boost to its purchases. What likely impact will that have?
Look, I think the key is what happens to the ports, because if you can get grain in, it's okay. But if, in fact, you stop providing grain to the market, then you'll get food riots. And if you get food riots, then people will pay above odds for grain. If that happens, then you will see a run on the commodity, because prices will, I guess, given the concerns we've seen across the world with grain, it'll only add to the fury, and I think that to me is a real issue, particularly for food inflation and the like.
Is there a concern, though, that the government system, which does, regulate the price of wheat, it may collapse? And if so, what sort of impact or effect will that have?
Look, I think that's one of the things. If it does collapse, and this is where we've got to be very close to the situation, then really we don't know what could occur. You could get that concern where you do get those food riots, which we have seen in North America, which does create a concern for the global commodity, because people actually feel that the price will go higher, and that aggravates the situation even further.
And of course, many analysts say that what we're seeing in Egypt is the direct result of the floods and the droughts, what we've seen in the sector, Russia, etc. Are there other, importers that are being affected by this? I
think, Winnie, this is a global concern. It's quite amazing when you go through all the weather issues around the globe. We've got another massive storm in America. Cyclone in Australia. We've had effects where governments are stepping in now. I think this is unprecedented, given the fact that the world is so close to commodity prices, that you will see the volatility continue, and any hint of a La Nina effect somewhere will have broad-reaching concerns back to the commodity and back to the consumer.
And just looking at the agricultural sector in general, do you think that we're at the beginning of a food crisis?
Look, it's very hard to say. But world ending stocks in a lot of commodities are okay, but some aren't. Cotton in itself reached another record high last night. We've got massive droughts again in China, which have been going on for something like 6-7 years. So I think we are at the beginning, if in fact these weather concerns remain paramount, and if the La Nina effect sort of just continues throughout the region, it is going to have a massive effect on the food inflation and also commodity prices.
Okay, now if we just move away from wheat and soft commodities for a moment and look at oil, it jumped to $100 a barrel on concerns that supply will be blocked at the Suez Canal. Will that continue to fuel the oil prices, these issues in Egypt?
Look, I think that they will, but I think that last night when we saw some price action, oil actually came off. Now, you've got OPEC out there saying...
What was behind that? Why did it come off?
I think it was more of a relaxed concern that the aggravations of the whole situation wasn't going to blow over. Anything that has an effect in the Middle East causes a Middle Eastern premium to be built into the market. And that's what we are seeing. What I think is that because we're at a stage where inventories are relatively high around the world, we don't have a crisis. And because OPEC are quite happy to increase quotas as well, we don't have a crisis that could see prices go to 110, 120. So I think it's relatively relaxed at the moment.
Okay, but long term, though, will this continue to sort of fuel an upward trend in oil? Will we see those lofty heights of, $147 US dollars a barrel that we saw a couple of years?
I hope not.
Right.
But what I do feel is that, that given where we are in the economic cycle, any imponderable of this magnitude will have an effect. Now, it could just be a temporary effect, and that's what we feel will occur if, in fact, something doesn't occur with the Suez or even particularly the Straits of Hormuz.
What do you think OPEC's next move will be, though? Will they increase production?
I think given they're happy with the price range, I think they're happy with it around 95 and 100, and I would not expect them to do anything until it starts to get up to that level. Remember, OPEC don't want to see prices higher because that will stall economic recovery. So it's a balancing game, but overall I think they will step in to keep oil at reasonable prices.
All right, moving on to copper. It's hit a record high. What's behind that?
Look, there's Chinese New Year is one thing. We always see a natural trend for it. But copper in itself has always had this supply concern. And when you see PMI data, particularly out of China, all encouraging, people say, hey, number one user, here we go. If the economy's still going and the steps aren't in play yet to slow it down, then when the supply hits, particularly on the concentrate side of it, then you see prices continuing to rally.
What happens if China hits a hard landing, though?
I think that's a story we don't really want to talk about.
Right, okay.
But we feel that
I
they're there.
have to ask the tough questions, Jonathan Barratt, so, you know. Well, if we move away from wheat and oil and we look at Australia now, we've obviously had these unprecedented floods in Queensland. I understand that Queensland grows or produces 90% of the sugar that Australia produces. So what impact is this having on that particular sector?
The floods have been a concern, but I think the cyclone, if it comes in, will affect probably 1/3 of our production. So I think that to me is a real issue because Australia exports 76% of its sugar it grows, and we represent probably about 3.6% of actual global supply. So if in fact the cyclone comes in, it is a concern, becomes more of a devastating effect. Once again, that's going to affect commodity price. It's going to affect sugar. Sugar is already at a 30-year high as we speak. So something like this could actually see sugar surge once again. And, of course, it'll be a lot more expensive, I guess, back to the consumer again.
All right, Jonathan Barratt, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Whitney.